Abolitionists.
Yeah, let's talk about abolition for a while.
The people I greatly respect, they're good Americans. I still regard them as respected colleagues. They have adopted an approach that is missing the narrative. In other words, there is a narrative, but they skip right from we, the United States, would be better off today if there were no nuclear weapons. They go right from that, which may be hard to argue with, all the way if there were no nuclear weapons in the world. And they skip all the way to we need to lead the world to zero nuclear weapons. And it astonishes me because these are bright, dedicated, experienced people. You first have to start with the fact that if you had said in 1975, particularly if you said 1960, but even if you had said in 1975, are we better off if there are no nuclear weapons in the world, we would have said absolutely not. Our nuclear weapons are essential to the defense of Europe. And the defense of Europe is essential to the continued well-being of the United States. Most people would have said nuclear weapons are an important part of our defense. So the idea that we would be better off if there were no nuclear weapons in the world is sort of a U.S. condition today. Mr. Putin doesn't believe he would be better off with no nuclear weapons. Kim Jong-un doesn't believe that. Premier Xi doesn't believe that. So we are seeing a demonstration of breathtaking arrogance. That is, if we believe we would be safer if there were no nuclear weapons in the world, then we assume that that's true for the rest of the world. And it's not. And as long as that's not true for the rest of the world, it's just useless discussion. On the other hand, have they had any impact on the desire for arms control? Yes. Negative impact. There was a time when the circle that I work in, there was a time when I would have told you I might be willing to go below 1550, but not if it's on the path to zero. So I support 1550 because you can still execute the strategy with 1550.
Yeah, 1550 being the New START number that we're putting under. Yes.
And the New START number, but the New START number is based on the strategy.
Right.
Smarter targeting, reduced elements, and the people we're trying to deter. We're not worried about Poland and Romania and anymore, etc. So I know people who would say, yes, we can go below 1550, but not if it's on the path to zero. So I guess I'm trying to make clear that I think the nuclear abolition movement is now harmful. It's harmful to arms control. It's harmful to counterproliferation. Because the greatest burst of proliferation would come if the 30-plus allies that live under our nuclear umbrella lose confidence in our nuclear umbrella.
Yeah, we'll come back and talk to that at a later time at greater length. Let me shift gears for a moment to June of 1992. when Strategic Air Command went out of existence and Strategic Command came into existence. You had mentioned earlier in talking about the JSTPS that there was a vision there even then that you wanted it to be more than JSTPS. You wanted it to be a real joint command. But you didn't quite get there then. But we did in 1992 in the sense that now all of the elements of the triad are under a single command. And you have been on the Strategic Advisory Group at STRATCOM for many years. You've done studies for them and that sort of thing. Let me first of all talk about STRATCOM at the beginning when it still was kind of almost purely nuclear, and then kind of fast forward to other things it's gotten into. We'll also at a later point come back and talk about theater nuclear forces and that kind of thing. But of course, when the Cold War ended, a lot of the impetus for planning theater nuclear forces went out of existence. And so in the early years of STRATCOM, you not only had the strategic mission, but you had the question of whether or not planning for the... STRATCOM was always a planning headquarters in many ways. And so let's talk about the planning process a little more. We talked about JSTPS, but we haven't really talked about the planning process.
The planning process got almost infinitely more complicated. In that during the Cold War, the concept was we had to maintain the capability for massive retaliation, and that included the plan. So we had a family of plans, but they were very straightforward. There was a set of levels, and the assumption was that you would, when you had the warning, that in conference with the president would be offered a very limited number of alternatives, and he would choose one, and we would execute. And it was just that straightforward. So what we in the command had to do was have the planning from the basic plan down to the air crew and the missile crew's ability to execute that plan. That was our planning horizon. Then over time, there was a great thirst for lesser options, partly because of proliferation, worrying about new threats, but also partly because we got away from the massive retaliation mindset. Still had to maintain the capability, but the idea that the most likely need for nuclear weapons was massive retaliation was no longer the case, and that is, it was more likely that there would be some lesser provocation. Perhaps one nuclear nation attacking another, but not us. Or perhaps a very limited attack on us by someone whom we would regard as irrational. So that meant that the planning process had to be a lot more agile, had to have a lot more possibilities. And so I would say the planning process is at least an order of magnitude more complicated than it was before.
And it still was a deliberate, I mean, you say more agile, but it still was a deliberate process because
Both.
of civilian involvement.
Both. It's a deliberate process with lots of options, but it also has to be a rapid response planning capability. And it gets exercised. Because now we're wise enough to know from recent experience, I can't possibly tell you where the next hotspot really is. I can tell you which one we're worried about, but I can't tell you where it really is because Syria really wasn't that high on our list.
How does capabilities-based planning fit into all of this?
Capabilities-based? I think it's always been capabilities-based.
Okay.
I don't know why we had to invent a term. You know that there are always two things you have to deal with: capability and intent. You can never base your plans on force structure on intent,
Mm-hmm.
because intent can change overnight, and intent is in the minds of a person or
Mhm.
2 people or 3 people.
Mm-hmm.
Capability doesn't change overnight.
Mm-hmm.
And I really don't have to worry about intent if they don't have capability. And I do have to worry about capability regardless of
Mhm.
what I perceive to be the intent at